Hello, good day, greetings, ladies and gentlemen, friends of Comesa Radio worldwide, the mind, the journey, the destiny. We apply our mind to the journey that takes us to our destiny. We are an African online radio station with a global reach, streaming live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Very cold South Africa indeed. Uh, Our shows are based on the principle called the idea. We inform and entertain, develop and educate, empower and support, associate and network. That's the idea. Our talk shows affirm and support business people, entrepreneurs, professionals in their personal and professional development journey, especially when it relates to operating in foreign markets, of course, even local markets. Our responsibility is to build the ecosystem, empower our stakeholders, collaborate across sectors, across continents, countries, share the insights and knowledge, and build a base for succession and inheritance for generations to come. So, what are we about today? We are going to be launching a new monthly show called Bridging Cultures. And I'm doing this with a friend of mine of many years, Dean Foster, all the way from New York. Dean, it's wonderful to have you online. It's been a long time since you and I have been planning to do something of this nature. How are you doing
Sam,
today? Welcome.
welcome, Sam. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you. I'm so glad that we finally made this happen. I know that we've spoken about doing something like this many times, and you mentioned just before in introducing the mission of the show about destiny. And maybe I feel a little bit of destiny is at work here, that we finally have come together and to talk about this very important topic of culture. So thank you. It's a delight to finally be doing this with you.
Indeed, indeed. I will introduce you now. I just want to acknowledge that we have in studio a friend as well of ours, Ruth Field. I've known Ruth for many years, like you, Dean, and I've always followed her career. And I'm glad that she can join us in this inaugural show. She is the Market Access Director for AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals Pty Limited here in South Africa. She leads strategic direction of AstraZeneca's access strategy for the portfolio, which includes health, economics, pricing and reimbursement, as well as corporate affairs. Currently, she focuses on therapeutic areas like oncology, cardiovascular, diabetes, and respiratory diseases. I don't know whether we should say diseases, Ruth, or how will you position it from your point of view?
Yes, that's correct.
And thank you for joining us. I'm glad you could be part of this inaugural show. Let me just a little bit tell the listeners about you, Dean, and I'm not going to read your very long profile. I just want to pick up a few things that speaks to what we want to talk about. And then I know you and I, we met at the Europe, Middle East, Africa conference of the Worldwide ERC, Worldwide Employee Relocation Council. And you will agree with me that that really shaped you, or you shaped them in terms of reaching out to foreign markets and the role that culture plays. And I'm sure that led to you, or you decided to establish the DFA Intercultural Global Solutions. You have been involved in a number of shows on CNN, many other universities like Harvard Business School, Columbia University School of Business, and And you have traveled the world. I mean, it's amazing. I don't know how you did. I know you have been to South Africa as well, but your visit to South Africa under our umbrella is still long due. You want to tell us a little bit more about other things that I might not see here that you are busy with? I know you run a podcast as well. Over to you, then, to say hi to the listeners and just tell them a little bit about yourself. Why culture?
Yeah. Okay. Well, Sam, thank you for that. It's. I think we met back at the EMEA conference. When was it? In 2005, 2006, I think.
Yeah, 2006, South 7 there in London, I think. Yeah.
It was in London at that time, yes. And I was so delighted to have met you then, and learn more about the work that you were doing. In my work, I would say for about 35 years, in one form or another, I've been involved in uh, dealing with companies that are working outside of their own borders, anywhere in the world, and talking mainly and only about the cultural issues that they need to understand when working with other countries. So we advise and consult for Fortune 500 companies, mainly large global companies, in their work, working in other countries, on the cultural issues, the cultural challenges that they face when having to work with people who might work differently from the way that they do. And I was very, very blessed, I would say, at the beginning of my career, so many years ago, to begin this work, because I was involved in anthropology and sociology. And I was very, very curious about how different cultures do work in different ways, and how the culture makes people work differently. So the way that we approach a business task in one country can be very different from the way that we approach and complete that business task in another country. And I found this quite fascinating as an anthropologist. But
Mm,
nobody was taking this information at the time and applying it to work and to global work. And this was also back 35 years ago when businesses were just beginning to do things in a more global way. And so, with a few colleagues, we started a small consultancy here in New York City to offer this kind of cultural information so that they can be more successful working in particular countries around the world.
mm,
I have to say that at the beginning, it was not an easy thing to do, because people were saying, "Well, why should I think about culture? Why should I spend money on learning about cultures? After all, business is just business, correct?"
mm,
Um, but I think that people, after a while, when they learned that there were cultural challenges, then they would come back to us and they would say, please help us out. Help us understand what is the problem that I have working in China, working in the United States, working in France, in working in Brazil, working in South Africa. Why is it different from the way that I do things in my home country? And when people started to experience these differences, that's when we started to actually have some success with our company. And we grew our company for 35 years. And I've had the privilege of learning about all these different cultural issues and speaking about these cultural issues in over 100 countries around the world.
mm.
And and I've made friends everywhere I've gone. Maybe I've made some enemies too. I'm sure I have, but but I hope I've made more friends than enemies. And it's been a wonderful experience to learn about the world for me and to share my knowledge with others. I would say that along the way, I've also written many books and many articles about cultural differences and global work. I'm the author. My first book was Bargaining Across Borders, about how different cultures negotiate in different
Mm,
ways. And my second and the remaining books are part of a series called the Global Etiquette Guide. And so we have a global etiquette guide for doing business in European cultures, global etiquette guide for Asia, global etiquette guide for the Middle East and Africa, global etiquette guide for Latin America. And so a lot of the information, of course, is obtainable in my books, and I'll be happy to share some of the information from my writings as well with the listeners at any point. So that's a little bit of a background on me. But Sam, let's talk about you for a moment.
Yeah.
You've been doing this wonderful coaching work. And I think coaching is such an important part of learning because we actually, to learn something, you can read it in a book or you can listen to somebody speak like myself. But to actually be able to take the information and then apply it in the real world day to day, that I think is where the real learning occurs. And that's where coaching is so important, where we help people apply this information that they might be able to read or learn about and apply it in a way that makes success for them. So congratulations on your work as a senior coach in Africa and a senior coach really around the world. I understand that from my conversations with you, and that you've just recently been certified as a master certified coach, and you've
Yes.
also written.
I'm actually working towards that. I'm a professional certified coach and a student of master certified coaching process with the ICF, International Coach Federation. I should get that by the end of the year. I'm left with let's say four mentor coaching sessions with a senior coach, and then I will have to sit for assessment, and then hopefully next year, early January, I could put the MCC letters behind my name.
Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah, and indeed, coaching is very helpful, Dean, because it's about real issues, and the people you're coaching actually teach you quite a lot as you engage with them. You are right. In this space, with international businesses, cross-cultural coaching becomes actually a big issue, and it is in demand. And I really, as somebody who has experienced global talent mobility during my days at Motorola, and that's when I met you. I'm very keen to get back into that space, especially as an executive coach, helping companies and executives deal with cultures in their markets.
Absolutely. So it's absolutely essential. We can do training. I can come in and speak about cultural differences. We can provide the information, but the next step is always coaching to
Yeah,
support people in the real world day to day as they try to apply this information in their daily work. And I think the best combination is when you can do both, when you
yeah,
can give people access to information and then help them coach as well, coach them through applying it. Very important. And
indeed.
you've written a book on coaching as well, haven't you?
Yes, yes. I published my book with Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. I launched it on the 31st of March this year. It is available on Amazon as a hardcover, paperback, and ebook. And currently, we are reviewing that book on a weekly basis. We just reviewed chapter 13 last night, which is titled Further Training Abroad, where these issues of culture were quite central. And next week, we'll be reviewing chapter 14, which is about homecoming dilemma. And there I'm sharing with people how difficult sometimes it could be to reintegrate in your own culture. How is that?
Absolutely, a very important point. We usually anticipate that we will have differences when we work in another culture or when we relocate to another culture.
Mm,
It's automatic to assume that if I'm relocating to a place very different from my home, that I will experience something that's different. I may not understand what those differences are. I may not know what those differences are, but I can anticipate logically that there might be differences. What we fail to do, though, is to anticipate that we will experience differences when we return home.
Yeah.
Because we expect that, well, coming home, I understand what my home is.
Mm.
I'm coming back to something that is familiar. But in reality, if you have been outside of your home for several years, if you have relocated to a foreign location and then you are first returning home, you are actually going back to a place that is not your home anymore.
Mm.
You're going back to a place that once was your home, but you actually are returning to a place that has changed,
Mm.
and you have changed. Most importantly, you have changed because of your experience in another culture. And so between all of those changes, very often people return back to, they think it's their home, they kind of recognize it, but they feel out of place.
Yeah.
And they've also been away from all of the opportunities that they would have had they remained. So they feel as if they cannot get started again. And
Mm.
it can be quite a challenge, quite an important challenge.
Indeed, indeed. I have had stories of people from South Africa or any other countries being sent to foreign markets as expatriates to support business there. And when they come back, they struggle to reintegrate to a point that they sometimes even go go away again, say, I'm failing to reintegrate back into my own company, into my country. My children can't anymore. They have made friends in this foreign country, and people just struggle. So, I mean, you probably have had such stories, Dean.
Absolutely. And there is a cost involved in this. And the cost is usually borne by the company, the sponsor, that is paying for all of these, this international relocation experience. So if a company, like AstraZeneca, for example, is sending people abroad to another culture and then brings them back home, but they have difficulty reintegrating back into their home environment, they may leave again, or
Yeah.
they may go elsewhere to another company that allows them to go back to a more familiar environment, a
Mm.
foreign environment once again.
Mm.
And if they lose this talent, this is very valuable talent, because these are people now who have learned the skills of being able to operate both at home and in a particular foreign location.
Yeah.
These are highly skilled people who can be a great benefit to the company. And if we lose them,
Mm.
we lose the investment that we have made in this entire experience.
Mm.
And it is a very costly investment for a company to move an individual and their family from one country to another.
Mm.
You can imagine the costs involved over the years. If we lose them and we let them go back to another foreign location, or to another company, all of that investment is lost.
It's
So it's a
lost. Yeah.
very serious
Yeah.
problem.
Just one last point before I bring Ruth in. I know, Dean, of a CEO that came to South Africa from Europe, that stayed here in South Africa, and at the end of his term, he didn't go back to Europe, but actually got employed in the US. And imagine, I mean, this was not because of culture, but it was just because of the visibility you get in these foreign cultures, and the opportunities that come with that. And it could be somebody have said that you are adapting very well in a foreign culture, you might as well come over this side. So those there are risks there, but the key thing is, can you function very well in this foreign culture to a point that actually it enriches your career opportunities?
Absolutely. And of course, people are always looking for career opportunities, and they will go where those opportunities reveal themselves.
Mm.
I think you're just describing a very interesting phenomenon, Sam. And sometimes it's been referred to, I've heard, as the serial expat.
Yeah.
because these people are more comfortable in foreign locations than in home locations, and they have these adaptation skills to
Mm-hmm.
be successful in all different kinds of locations. And so they go where the opportunities are.
Mm.
And these are serial expats, and
Mm.
not an uncommon situation.
Wow. Ruth, I have known you to be somebody that only works for global multinationals. I might be wrong. Maybe let's start by asking you to greet the listeners and just say hi to them and tell them a little bit about yourself. I have introduced you shortly, but probably you have other things to share about yourself that relate to this topic. Over to you, Ruth, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sam. Good evening to all the listeners. Yes, Sam, you're correct. I've worked mostly for multinationals for most of my life in the pharmaceutical space. So I basically work with a lot of people across the globe, people with diverse cultures, diverse ways of doing things. And it's very important that one really understands the cultures, the ways of negotiations, the do's and don'ts. So for me, this is a very, very important topic, which is very practical and also something that we live on a day-to-day basis.
Mm. Wow, beautiful stuff. And just tell us a little bit about the career path that you had followed and professionally. What are you doing now as a director for market access and corporate affairs?
I'm in the pharmaceutical space, which is mainly the medicines. So as a market access director, I'm very much involved in expanding access for the use of our products and for patients in cancer, in the renal respiratory area, diabetes, and also rare diseases as well. We're actually going into that space now. The very important thing for us is to basically look at the entire patient journey. So it's basically the education, the awareness that happens in the communities, how we interact with the healthcare practitioners and the institutions as well, so that those patients actually are well referred within the referral lines. We also work with NGOs, we work with governments, we work with the private sector, because we mainly focus on the medicine side, but the entire patient journey has got so many touch points. So those touch points where it's not our core business, we make sure that we partner with the other organizations. And that's why it's also very important to understand their culture, their way of doing things, and also to ensure that those organizations sometimes are not necessarily in South Africa. They might be in many other countries where we do business in.
Mm, mm. And you will have colleagues all over the world that you exchange information and knowledge with, special cultural type of information, right?
Indeed, because we are a matrix organization, we collaborate quite well across the different sectors. So, for instance, I mean, today I was in meetings where there were probably 18 countries involved. And these are employees that are in different departments. You've got the medical side, you've got finance, you've got our market access division, you've got corporate affairs. So they're all across. And the way you interact with them, not just because they're in other countries, but because of the work that they do. Sometimes the way that we interact is quite different, and the way that they do things is quite different as well. So one needs to really understand that.
Mm, mm. Are you always cultured? I know your time is coming in the second half. I'm just wanting to give our listeners a context when we're going to do the quizzes. Do you always intentionally make sure that you are in touch with the culture of the person that you are engaging in business with uh, on your day-to-day work, or is it you are so inducted into it that you don't even think about it, you just fit in the cultural dynamics?
No, one has to actually be very deliberate about it, because culture is constantly evolving, first of all. But at the same time, it's always important to make sure that one doesn't make cultural mistakes, out of respect and also for inclusivity as well.
Wow. Then we have a very, very interesting guest here today.
Absolutely, Ruth. some of your remarks really struck me as very powerful. I think your last comment about the fact that culture is dynamic and always changing is very important, and it's problematic too because I just read some very recent research that says that even though cultures do change, and cultures certainly do, um, there is an aspect to cultures where the most fundamental parts of cultures change the least. So lots of parts of cultures can change, but the parts that change the most quickly are often the least impactful. The parts that change more slowly are often the things that are much more fundamental to cultures. And I think that's very important for us to keep in mind. And it must be very hard, I think, for managers working globally to constantly consider this phenomenon that, yes, of course, cultures are changing and people as individuals might be very different, more or less from the traditional culture. But at the same time, the traditional culture still has a very powerful effect on how the organization works. And I think that's a real challenge to always keep that in mind. I think it's very
Mm.
difficult.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm sure Ruth is more than ready to share with us her insights into the Gulf Arabia cultures when we come to that point. Um, Dean, listeners are probably wondering, but why is Dean and Sam deciding to host a monthly a live show on bridging cultures? How will you answer that question?
Well, I'm probably being a little self-serving and maybe selfish in my answer, and also maybe because it's my perspective. So for me, I'm always living with this issue every day. But um, I do think that in the 21st century, it is impossible to do any kind of work without crossing cultures.
Mm,
If you just think of it, not only is it global work that we're doing because of technology, because of communications, because of supply chains, because we work for multinational companies, but even in our own daily lives, the experiences that we have living, and that includes, of course, doing work, uh, inevitably takes us across cultures, even within our own culture. Think of all the different cultural. Think of all the cultural differences that exist within South Africa,
mm,
within the United States, within most any country. Some countries have more, some countries have less, but almost all countries have cultural differences within their countries. And certainly between countries, it is inevitable that we experience them.
mm,
So those of us who can master these differences are the ones who have the advantage in the 21st century. And
mm,
I would say that if we don't master these differences, if we don't know how to manage these cultural differences, we don't understand them, respect them, and manage them, then we will fail in our
mm,
21st century work. So
mm,
it's absolutely essential. It's just a fundamental, essential skill.
mm, mm. And should it be driven by the organizations we work for, or is it sitting right at the individual's level?
Uh, it's both. I'm sorry. That's probably not a satisfactory answer, but I think it's both. Certainly, it's been our experience and our privilege to work with many enlightened clients, organizations, and corporations and multinationals who understand this issue. They
Mm,
see it, they know it, and they call us in to help.
mm,
Um, and they do so not because they think it's the right thing to do. I believe that they do. I would like to think that, but mainly because it's the profitable thing to do. If
mm,
I don't give this information to my managers who are working in other cultures, they will not succeed,
mm,
and it will cost the company money. If I do provide this information and and enlightenment to our global managers, they will simply succeed more quickly, more easily, and we won't risk losing our international investments. So it's a very bottom line issue.
Mm,
It simply costs more
mm, mm,
when people work across cultures, and the failure rate, the possibility of failure, is higher
mm,
when people work across cultures,
mm.
because there is an element of uncertainty. And if you don't understand the culture, you can fall into lots of costly problems.
Mm.
And by the way, who is going to get the deal?
Yeah.
If the company that's going to get the deal is the company that people feel comfortable working with.
Mm,
So sooner or later, it becomes a bottom line issue. It's not a nice to do or a good to do. It's a must do.
mm,
And so lots of companies understand this.
mm.
But at an individual level, as you mentioned, Sam, it's also important for individuals to take responsibility for being prepared to work in whatever culture that they have to be working in.
Yeah. Here in South Africa, culture features quite commonly in a program called Diversity Management and Inclusion, which is actually part of our broader transformational initiatives since 1994. And I think cultural diversity is actually itself a program in countries like South Africa and the US. But what we are saying with this program, we're saying that it is both the company and the individual to look at this, because on top of you being eligible for a role or a position, you also must be suitable because of the requirements of the environment you are in, right?
Absolutely correct.
Mm. Great. So I hope we are coming across quite clear to our listeners. But one part of our show that I like very much is that we're going to engage them in every month when we're having this show by inviting somebody like we did today, inviting Sister Ruth to give us practical experience and insights into particular culture that we will be addressing. And I know some can't wait to know what is the lineup of the countries and cultures that we would like to be discussing. And then I think we're going to benefit a lot, Dean, from your writing and also from the work you do with your associates all over the world that are fitting you with the real on the ground information. Maybe you may want to also tell us what kind of associates do you work with, in what kind of countries, and how do they fit into your organization's reservoir of insights and knowledge?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. When we began our work, it was just myself and a few local colleagues, and we very quickly realized that if we were going to provide accurate and timely information about working in other cultures to our clients, that we had to have a network of informed people on the ground all around the world who could provide us with this kind of information. And so certainly there is a body of research that exists about how cultures can be different. And that's been part of my work and part of my writing for many years. But at the same time, we need to have timely and immediate information as it changes country by country. And so we developed a network today of over 200, what we refer to as cultural consultants on the ground in over 150 countries around the world, who can help us by giving us up-to-date current information about the culture. And we incorporate this information into every consultation that we do with our clients. So these people exist to assist all of our clients in all of the countries that they're operating in with up-to-date and current cultural information. And we've actually established this particular expertise called a cultural consultant. And we're always interested in working with people who would like to be cultural consultants for us in their country. What we look for, of course, are some basic criteria. We look for people who actually understand the literature and the research on culture that exists already. So we don't want to train people to the field of intercultural consulting, but we would very much like to work with people who are already familiar with the research that exists in this field of intercultural consulting. We like to work with professional coaches and consultants who understand what it's like to work in multinational environments, training and coaching people so that they are familiar with the whole process of learning in a business environment.
Mm.
Of course, we like to work with people who can deliver in their first language, in their home language, as well as foreign languages. And we like to work with people who can demonstrate their own personal experiences working with other cultures. So
Mm.
the more cultures you can tell me you have worked with and in, the more cultures you may have traveled in, the more cultures you may have valuable experience working with, the more we are interested in working with you.
Mm.
And when we see an individual with these kinds of criteria, then we train them to our methodology and our consulting and coaching and training methodology to then enable them to be a consultant for us with our clients. And
Mm.
we have people like this all around the world.
Yeah. Wow. And you know, it is interesting that in some countries, maybe our country included, that people do sometimes find themselves fighting over their cultural differences. But you are saying to me that actually the insights into these different cultures is an asset professionally. It's actually a competency that you can actually trade it in and make a career on the basis of it.
Absolutely correct. Yes. And
Mm.
and help people use culture as a tool for being more successful in their professional work. And I think whenever that happens, also to become more successful in their personal lives.
Mm.
When we understand that cultural differences, yes, if cultural differences are misunderstood or ignored or dismissed as unimportant, then they will become problems. And eventually we will have disagreement, we will have dispute, we will have misunderstanding, and certainly we will have problems at work. But when cultural differences are understood, they can be managed.
Mm.
And there are best practices for managing those differences in order to use those differences to see the world differently, to understand there may be solutions to problems that exist that I have not been able to see, but someone else from another culture might be able to see them. And maybe that can help me in my life and in my work.
Mm.
So you can look at cultural differences as a problem to be overcome, or you could look at cultural differences as a tool for accelerating success. It
Mm.
depends on how you use them.
It's your attitude towards culture that is important here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, the bad news is that historically, when people don't recognize cultural differences or when they approach them as problems, whenever we approach people who are different from ourselves, if we don't understand them, oftentimes we have negative responses. So we become defensive, we dismiss things we don't understand, we judge people either good or bad. But when we understand why people behave the way they do, then we start to have positive responses. Maybe there's something in the way they see things that could help me with my problems and my life.
Mm.
And then it can become a benefit. And the bad news is that it is not automatic. We have to be educated. We
Mm.
have to learn.
Yeah.
But the good news is that we can learn, and
Yeah.
we can use these differences to help ourselves.
Yeah. Wonderful. I'm going to ask Ruth to log out and log back in because she's not hearing you very well. And I want her to really listen to this next part that we're going to be addressing. Ruth, if you can just log out and then log in again, please. We want you not to miss this one. Dean, so we can actually talk about country-specific cultures, but there is also region-specific culture. And I'm thinking of our region in Southern Africa to say that there is a regional culture that is also impacting on us. We, as a country, we belong to a region, and we cannot insulate ourselves from the culture of that particular region. And as you respond to this, I would want you also to take it further and explain to us what Gulf Arabia culture is. What countries constitute that region to a point that we can even talk about a regional culture referred to as Gulf Arabia culture.
Sam, that's such an important point because there's so many different kinds of culture. There is your national culture, your culture from your homeland. There's the culture of the region of your country, and all of these things impact. They have an effect on your behaviors, your ideas, your values, your beliefs. And when we look at Gulf Arabia, for example, we see individual countries like Bahrain, and of course, the largest country in the region, Saudi Arabia. We have UAE, we have Yemen, we have Qatar, we have Kuwait. These are all individual countries with their own individual cultures within a region, and the regional culture provides each of these individual cultures with certain things that they all share. So, for example, one of the things about the regional culture of Gulf Arabia is that most all of the people in the region, no matter what country they are in, most all the people in the region are Muslim,
Yeah.
and they follow a particular kind of Islam. Now, if we dig deeper and we look at the individual countries, we see that there are differences in the kind of Islam that is followed, in the way that it is observed. So there is a regional similarity that makes, for example, all of these countries more similar than they are different. But then when you dig down into each individual country, you do see differences. And if you dig down even further within any one country, you will see differences between regions within those countries. So, for example, if you take a look at the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, within the UAE, we have Dubai,
Yeah.
and then we also have Abu Dhabi, the
Yeah.
capital.
Yeah.
And if you know that if you've been to Dubai and then when you go to Abu Dhabi, you are experiencing two very different cultures.
Yeah.
Yet there are things about them that make them very similar, and there are things about them that they share with other countries within the region as well.
Mm.
It's
Wow.
complicated.
Mm. Mm. Uh, so the Gulf Arabia culture is really a term that is coined by who?
Well, I think that we want to use the term in order to distinguish the cultures that are more similar within the region of Gulf Arabia and that are different from countries outside of the Gulf Arabian region, such as North Africa.
Yeah.
When we look at North Africa, we are also looking at a region that is mainly Islamic, not
Yeah.
not totally, but mainly,
Yeah.
but of an Islam that's very different and with very different with very different national cultures. So when we look at the Maghreb or the North African culture, we're looking at Egypt and Tunisia and Algeria and Morocco and Libya. And these are more similar to each other and more different from the countries in the Gulf Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah.
So the countries within the Gulf Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, etc. These countries, Oman, these countries share more similarity with each other and more differences compared to Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, etc. And so we can make a distinction between Gulf Arabian culture and North African culture. And if we go even further afield into Africa, we have sub-Saharan Africa, and we have South Africa and East Africa, and these different regions, and West Africa, of course, and these different regions within each region are more similar to each other, but are also more different between the regions.
Yeah.
And that's how we make a distinction between these different regional cultures as well.
Beautiful,
So,
beautiful. I think you're challenging me and my fellow listeners to start looking broadly into SADC, as we call it, Southern African cultures. And then you have been to South Africa, Dean, and I'm sure you have some insights as well from your associates up down here.
yes, absolutely. I think one of the things that is complicated when in working with, and I'm going to use the term South African cultures, not just within the Republic of South Africa, but within the region of South Africa. One of the things that makes, I think, challenges for businesses and individuals from outside the region is to appreciate the complexity of the cultures that are represented in the South African region. Because I think unique to the South African region, we have a higher degree of complexity than we would find in some of the other regions in Africa. For example, in North Africa, um, in, uh, in the Maghreb area that I mentioned before. This is not to say that Egypt and Tunisia and Algeria and Morocco don't have complexity of cultural differences. They do, but the degree of differences, I think, is the important
Mm, mm.
distinguishing factor here.
Beautiful. I can't wait for the day when we will be talking about Southern African cultures. I'm glad we are not going to talk about South Africa culture. We want to talk about Southern African region cultures and then hone into Zimbabwean culture, Botswana, South Africa, and then say how are those impacted by the national cultures of these countries to make the region.
Right. And within each of those countries, we see a high degree of complexity when compared to looking at a different African region.
Beautiful. Before I want to respond to a number of inputs from colleagues on the line so that we wrap up the first segment. There is a comment coming from a colleague, Sylvia Mamurare. She's saying that, and I know she's an expert in HR, having worked in that environment. She's saying that understanding cultural differences is an important competency. How then do we define this competency if one seeks to acquire the skill or the competency per se?
That's an excellent question, Sylvia. Thank you for that. One of the things that we have been trying to do as an organization all of the years that we have been working in this is to establish some benchmarks for evidence of cultural competency. So there are ways of measuring, and I think measuring is an important aspect of this. There are ways of measuring and evaluating cultural competency, and there are various tools that exist in HR today that measure cultural competency. The degree, for example, of adaptability, the degree to which one can demonstrate knowledge of particular cultures, or the degree to which one can simply demonstrate on key measures, demonstrate the ability to be adaptable to differences in general in a positive way as opposed to a negative way. So there are various HR tools that are out there that can measure these things. And I know that many of our clients use various HR tools to do so. So I think that cultural competency does have its benchmarks and can be and should be measured.
Will that be what we call now these days a cultural intelligence? Is that
Yes, that is a term that's often used. But I think when it is used, it's a very broad term to define any kind of cultural competency. And I think what's important for clients is to determine ahead of time what specific cultural competency do they want. Are they looking for people who can demonstrate knowledge and skills managing particular cultures? So are we looking for people who know about China, for example? Or are we looking for individuals who are simply adaptable to any kind of difference so that we can send them eventually to China and eventually to Brazil and eventually to South Africa and eventually to France? So I think it's important for clients to determine what specific skill they are looking for. But then once we know that, we can measure for it.
Beautiful. Let me read all the inputs and then you can use that to sum up this first segment because I'm watching time and so that we can transition into the next segment with these inputs. You don't have to answer all of them in this segment because we can open up the second segment with them, but it's important that we take the colleagues' inputs. Let me read what colleague Andulela Suka say. She says that I definitely agree that both companies and individuals need to embrace and understand different cultures. Being prepared to work in whatever culture requires an open mind and willingness to learn. And I also agree that it is impossible to do any kind of work these days without crossing culture. The tricky part is balancing culture and individualism because individuals continue to evolve. Literally every day is becoming a new day. I will repeat this in the second half so that we don't miss others. Then Divesh Mutilal is also a friend. He says, yes, we play and work in a global environment, whether it is virtual or not. We have multinational communities and the understanding of culture links to professionalism. And then he continues to say, there is a general lack of respect and an accepted hierarchy in the UAE according to where people come from and skin color does have a bearing. Even the pay for same work is different according to your culture. So that is an observation, I guess, there. And then Angelica continues to say that I worked both in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And Dean, you are right, it is complicated. And and then the last point, of course, from Sylvia Mamrari again, SADC culture. Is that what we will term ours? That's that regional culture discussion you and I. Yeah, let's see how many of those points you can respond to, but you don't have to be rushed. We have 1 more hour to come in the second segment, Dean.
Yeah, well, since we are going to be speaking about Gulf Arabian culture, I would like to hone in on the comment about the differences between Dubai and Abu Dhabi within the single country of the United Arab Emirates. You can step off the plane in Dubai and you can step off the plane in Abu Dhabi, and most everyone can feel the difference between those two cities. Abu Dhabi is the capital. It's the administrative center of the UAE. It is the political center of the UAE. It's the government. Dubai, of course, is the commercial capital. And it is the commercial center of the activities of the business activities of the UAE. And these create two very different cultural feelings. The Dubai is much more focused outward to the rest of the world. Abu Dhabi is focused more inward to the rest of the UAE.
Mm.
And any traditional elements of the UAE, I think, are more visible, they're more palpable. We experience them much more immediately in Abu Dhabi. Um, Many more progressive elements of the culture, more elements that have been more influenced by the rest of the world, we experience in Dubai. So Dubai is the more international city, Abu Dhabi is the more domestic city. This is going to affect how people behave
Mm.
and their mentality. And you might be working with more government bureaucrats in Abu Dhabi. You might be working with more globally experienced multinational managers in Dubai.
Mm. Well, I remember very well that, and I think many organizations, if they decide to establish their Middle East Africa office, original office, they will prefer to set it up in Dubai because of its attractiveness to the international global talent.
Precisely. And I think the comment also about the differences with amongst the people working in the UAE is a very important comment. It's one of the hallmarks of UAE culture is that it's very difficult to define the people of the UAE because a significant percentage of the population comes from everywhere else.
Yeah,
There are very few nationals born there compared to the size of the working population, which is usually made up of individuals from South Asia, from the rest of the Middle East region, and other parts of Africa and the world. So, who is what constitutes UAE culture in the first place? Is it a culture made up of cultures from everywhere else? Or is there something indigenous about the culture itself that we can describe, which becomes its own complicated problem?
mm, wow. And so yeah, you have raised a very important point to the listeners, those who haven't been there. You might be in Dubai and not experience Gulf Arabia traditional culture. You might be experiencing a mixed culture from various parts of the world.
Absolutely, absolutely the case. And as I think one of the listeners had mentioned, individuals who come to Dubai as workers are often organized according to various benchmarks, including skin color.
Mm,
So there is a definite hierarchy in the working groups within the country, and this hierarchy, however we choose to judge it, we might disagree with it, um, but it exists nevertheless, and so we have to be aware of it and we have to manage it.
beautiful. Wow, Ruth, I hope we have added a bit to your collection of points that you're going to be referring to in the next segment. How does that sound?
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Yeah, lovely. We have 2 more minutes to go. Yeah, sure, that's rich what you have shared with us, Dean, and I think it's just the beginning. We're going to be unpacking this, and I guess some of the insights you're sharing with us can be used to address cultures across the globe. It doesn't have to be. I mean, that competency that you were talking about can help you to see you through many other cultures, irrespective of where you get it from.
Yes, I think we're talking about developing a mindset, a
Mm,
global way of seeing the world,
mm,
which is which is something that is not automatic when we
yeah.
just when we live without this information or when we don't experience other cultures. But
Mm,
over time, when we become informed and enlightened about the importance of culture, we and experienced with it, we then do develop a certain kind of mindset, which is very different from a domestic mindset. And
mm,
this global mindset is an open way of thinking, an acceptance of differences, a curiosity about how people might see things differently, believe things differently, value things differently, and how those differences might not be problems, but might in fact provide solutions to
Beautiful.
problems that I'm having. And
Beautiful.
when we stay with that open mindset, it can actually help us.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wow, wonderful. Really be interacting a lot with our guest, Ruth Field, in terms of the quizzes that we've prepared for her. Yeah, we'll be with you in 5 minutes. Dean and Ruth, just stay in the studio, don't go away. Welcome back, colleagues, friends, listeners. We are in the second segment of this inaugural show, Bridging Cultures. I'm Sam Tsima from Johannesburg, and I'm working together tonight with my friend Dean Foster from New York. And we are joined by Ruth Field, who is the Director of Market Access and Corporate Affairs at AstraZeneca. She is our special guest. She's going to be engaging with us on the quiz. There's no right or wrong. There's only what you know about the cultures. Dean, do you want just to reflect a little bit on what we've touched on? There is an additional point here from Professor Rataimani saying that very interesting analysis, perhaps specific examples of differences and similarities of note will be helpful. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Maybe I hope we'll address that. I think we are. I think the rest we have addressed. So over to you. Welcome, Ruth and Dean, to the second segment. And thanks to the listeners that are engaging us through the WhatsApp messages here. We're now going to be focusing on the Gulf Arabia culture, Dean, and I'm glad you touched on that quite comprehensively in the first segment. That must have helped Ruth to reorganize herself in terms of those quizzes that we want to engage with her for the purposes of enlightening ourselves. Over to you. Dean?
Oh, I'm sorry, Sam. I thought
Yeah.
you were speaking with Ruth there for a moment.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very, very curious to see how people feel about these quiz questions, because one of the things that I've always experienced myself is that even though I've been fortunate enough to learn about cultures because of my work, I'm always impressed with the fact that I don't know very much.
There's so much to learn.
The more I know, the more I realize I need to know even more. And
Yeah.
so I'm always grateful to be able to speak with experts.
And following on that, there is a question here or a comment from our colleague Eric Shipalana. He's asking, are there any programs available to acculturize, wow, that's a new word for me, to acculturize experts before they go into a new culture?
Yes, and we've been offering those programs for over 35 years. Thank you for asking the question. That's our job, right, Sam? To provide these programs.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I want you and Ruth to engage each other on those quizzes that you have prepared from your team. Wonderful indeed. We are blessed with so much resources from your side, Dean, and I'm sure our listeners are going to love learning from you all the time.
Well, I think what we did was we provided 5 questions that that have multiple choice answers. So for each question, you can choose the right answer from 4 possible answers, and there is only one right answer. So it's A, B, C, or D. And it's either A or B or C or D is the right answer. But the whole idea here is not to have the best right answers, to but to learn from this, right? So we can even learn from the wrong answers, right?
Yeah.
I think we can. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
The whole idea is to simply learn more about Gulf Arabian culture. Now, these questions are specific to different countries within the Gulf Arabia region. So, if we ask these kinds of questions about other cultures, we might get different answers. But for Gulf Arabia, each question has only one correct answer, and it might be different if we were doing it for a different region.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Do you want me to read the quizzes, or are you going to take it over, Dean, and just engage with Ruth on them?
Well, Ruth, are you ready to be challenged with these very difficult questions?
I am ready to be challenged, Dean.
Okay, let's do number 1. And Ruth, we're very fortunate to have you because you are above average brilliant, right? When it comes to this. So, I hope that that even if you come up with the wrong answers, no doubt we will all learn something from that. Okay, so here's question number 1, and we have 5 questions. Question number 1. You are trying to arrange a virtual meeting from your office in London with your team in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So the best time in Riyadh for both you and the team to meet would be, and the answer for the best time would be A, Friday morning, or B, Thursday afternoon, or C, Monday afternoon, or D, Monday morning. Okay, so once again, you are in London. You are trying to arrange a meeting, a virtual meeting with your team in Riyadh. You're trying to figure out the best time to do it. Should it be A, Friday morning, B, Thursday afternoon, C, Monday afternoon, or D, Monday morning? And I'm wondering what the listeners think the answers might be.
Yeah, maybe we might. Let's ask them to drop the answers in the chat box in the WhatsApp group. I'm actually watching and hoping to see someone answering it. Maybe repeat it slowly again. Repeat it slowly, Dean, so that we can also have their inputs.
Right. So you're in London. You want to have a virtual meeting with your team in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and you want to schedule the best time to have the meeting. Should it be A, Friday morning, B, Thursday afternoon, C, Monday afternoon, or D, Monday morning?
And you will want them to also give us the reason why they think they chose the answer they chose.
Maybe, yes, if they could give us a reason. Maybe some people are just guessing and they have no reason. If you're just guessing, I remember a professor of mine once at university said, if you don't know the answer, then choose C, because it's more likely that C is the best response. But I have to give you a hint. In this case, C is not correct.
Yeah. It's a very challenging one. It is in Saudi Arabia specific, you say, or Riyadh specific. and London.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's London and Riyadh are the two locations. So best time: A, Friday morning; B, Thursday afternoon; C, Monday afternoon; or D, Monday morning.
Hmm. I have Sekha Lemetse here, one of our friends as well. She is choosing D, Monday morning.
Aha. Aha. And Ruth, what do you think?
So I selected Monday morning, and the rationale for me was that Fridays usually people are preparing to go for most during midday. So the mornings are not really quite good for them. And in the afternoons, if you look at probably 1 o'clock until about late, they're also preparing for their prayers. So it's always better to work around the prayer times. So Monday morning for me seems to be the best.
Wow. Let's hold it there because answers are coming through. Sam Tsima says Thursday afternoon. I hope the colleagues online can also submit some reasoning as Ruth has done. So yeah, we have on the chat we have D, and then we have Thursday afternoon, which is B for Ben. So we've got 2 Ds and 1 B.
Well, we know that C is not correct.
Yeah,
Do we have any others coming in, Sam, or should we talk about the right answer?
I think we can talk about the right answer.
Okay, well, the right answer for this question is D, Monday morning. And let's take a look at the wrong answers first so we can learn something. A, Friday morning would not be good because Riyadh is in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a devout Muslim nation. And so people are going to be going to prayers because in Islam, Friday is the Sabbath. And because Friday is the Sabbath, we're not working on Friday. So Friday is a very bad day to be doing any kind of business. And expecting people to be available for a virtual meeting on Friday in Riyadh is unreasonable. Friday morning or even Friday afternoon. Thursday afternoon, B, because Friday is the Sabbath and the Sabbath begins at sundown, it actually begins Thursday night. And because Thursday night is when we begin the observance of the Sabbath, by Thursday afternoon, work starts to slow down. Also, people are trying to finish whatever work they have to by the time of sundown. So asking people to join up on a virtual meeting on Thursday afternoon might be very inconvenient as they are trying to wind down their work. See, Monday afternoon. Well, Monday afternoon isn't a bad idea because we're not concerned about the Sabbath. People are working on Mondays, but afternoons in general are not a good time to schedule virtual meetings because as the day goes on, the things that people have to finish before the end of the day start to catch up on them. And so it's always best to schedule a meeting in the morning because that way, if you need more time in the afternoon to do other things, that's possible. So whenever possible, always schedule a morning meeting. And the best morning between the available options here would therefore have to be Monday morning. So the answer to the first question is D, Monday morning.
Wow, congratulations to you, Ruth and Seha. You got it right. But there is some inputs here. Eric was asking if it was a London time. So I think that was another angle.
Good question. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh,
And Mahlatsi Letsoalo is saying, she said Monday, since it's their second day of the week.
That's right. Monday is the second day of the week. So we really have to think about the Islamic calendar when working in Gulf Arabia, which means Thursday night Sabbath begins. Friday is the day off. Saturday is technically it can be a work day, but people like to take the extra day to have a 2-day weekend. And then Sunday, of course, is a work day. It's day number 1. And Monday is work day number 2.
Mm. So basically, their weekend is Monday and Saturday, the 2 days of the weekend.
The 2 days of the weekend are Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Mm.
So
Great.
that really affects how you schedule meetings, how you schedule deadlines, when you expect people to be available to do things, and remember, people's activities slow down as sunset approaches, and as these weekly holidays have to be observed.
Mm. Beautiful. Great. Let's move to the second one.
Okay, second
Do you
question.
have any comment to make, Ruth? Sorry about that.
No, I don't have any comment. I'm actually very impressed with Dean, how you are explaining the different days and the reasoning behind it.
And within the region, thank you, Ruth, things are changing. Let's always keep in mind that these questions, of course, are based on traditional scenarios. You may be working with an organization that doesn't observe these things as much. You may be working with individuals who are different from individuals who are more observant. But when we work with lots of people, and when we work with institutions or organizations or businesses, typically we have to default to the more traditional ways of doing things because we want to include everyone, including people who want to do things in a more traditional way. And one of the hallmarks of Gulf Arabian regional culture in general is that while there are areas within the region that are more progressive, such as Dubai, there are also other areas in the region, such as Riyadh and other areas in Saudi Arabia, that are more traditional. So this is a meeting in Riyadh. I would have to choose the more traditional way of scheduling my meetings.
Mm. Beautiful. Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Ruth. Let's go to the second quiz.
Okay, second question. Remember, we have 5 of these. So the second scenario is that you are invited into a traditional meeting room in Kuwait, which requires that you sit on cushions placed low on the floor. And you should, therefore, and we have 4 choices. So once again, the scenario is that you are invited into a traditional meeting room for business in Kuwait, which requires that you sit on cushions placed low on the floor. And that's part of Kuwaiti culture, traditional Kuwaiti culture. So therefore, you should A, B, C, or D. Here we go. A, remove your shoes upon entering the room and sit cross-legged. That's A. Or B, leave your shoes on and sit cross-legged. Or C, leave your shoes on and apologize for asking for a Western-style chair. Or D, take your shoes off and apologize for asking for a Western-style chair. A very specific scenario. You are invited into a traditional business meeting in Kuwait, and it requires that you sit on cushions placed low to the floor. Therefore, you should A, remove your shoes upon entering and sit cross-legged. B, leave your shoes on and sit cross-legged. C, leave your shoes on and apologize for asking for a Western chair. Or D, take your shoes off and apologize for asking for a Western chair. A, B, C, or D? Which is the more correct?
Okay, I've got the first input from Shimane Mashiro. He's choosing option A. Remove your shoes upon entering and sit cross-legged.
Okay.
And then also Seha is also choosing A. So we have two answers, same answer. And then Grace Lebogang Misachwa choosing option A. So it looks like I've got 3 A's so far.
And I'm going to give a hint here. Once again, C is not correct.
Leave your shoes on and apologize for asking for a Western style chair. So C is not right. Okay.
You might be able to do that, but it's not the best answer.
Okay. So we have 3 A's. It looks like, yeah. Let's hear Ruth.
Ruth, what do you think?
So I selected A, to remove my shoes upon entering and sitting cross-legged. And it was mainly because most of the time when I'm in those countries, I find that the people usually take off their shoes and leave them at the door, and then they sit cross-legged. So out of respect for the culture and how they're doing things. But then I also thought with the kind of shoes that one wears, it wouldn't be so comfortable to actually sit with them. And also from a hygienic side as well, I think, it wouldn't be too hygienic as well to take the shoes with and sit with them on those low pillows. In terms of asking for the chairs, I just thought if everybody else is sitting on the floor, it will probably come across as it may be interpreted as being arrogant or disrespectful in terms of asking for a chair. Unless, of course, probably if one realized that they will never be able to get up if they sit on such a low pillow. So my answer is A.
And Ruth, the correct answer is A. You are correct. That's right.
And there are 4 answers in agreement with her as well. So consensus from Shimane Mashiro, Sekha Pajane, Grace Misacho, and Patsy.
Well, congratulations to everybody who got that one correct. This is an interesting example, I think, because it's really about something very, very simple. It's etiquette and the way you want to sit. And lots of cross-cultural mistakes can be made with etiquette in many different cultures. How should I sit? How should I eat? Which hand should I use? How should I greet people? Do I give them a kiss? Do I give them a fist bump? Do I shake hands? Do men and women have to do it differently? And these kinds of questions always come up. They usually come up immediately because we have to greet people when we enter a room. And we have to sit down. And if we go to a meal, we have to use certain kinds of utensils or not. Maybe we don't use any kind of utensils. So very often when we experience cultural differences, one of the first things we experience are these etiquette issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it does make a difference to know these things, but I don't think these are the things that get us in the most trouble. Because even in this example, Kuwaitis know that for people who are unfamiliar with traditional Arabian style rooms, that it may be difficult for them to sit on cushions on the floor. And therefore, if you were to say, I'm sorry, this is uncomfortable for me, do you mind if I sit in a chair? They would certainly understand. But Ruth, you are correct that it would come across as making the Kuwaitis feel that they should have thought about accommodating the guest with a chair and realizing that they did not. And that would make somebody feel bad about the situation. And certainly in Gulf Arabian culture, there is a high degree of importance placed on hosting guests throughout all of the region, Kuwait and every other country in Gulf Arabia. There is an obligation by the host to take care of a guest in very lavish ways. And suddenly being made aware that you did not provide your guest with a chair would probably make the Kuwaiti host feel very uncomfortable, make them feel that they made a mistake. And so I would not raise that point, as you correctly said. And this idea of the host um, lavishly taking care of the guest is reflected in the degree to which you will be offered food, the degree to which it is expected that you would eat all the food on your plate. And if you do eat all the food on your plate in Gulf Arabia, you can be sure that you will be given more food because that's a sign that you are still hungry. And so you are obligating your host to give you even more food every time you eat all the food on your plate.
Wow.
And so if you don't want any more, what you should do is leave some food on your plate because that's a sign that you are now full. And you don't want your host to feel uncomfortable about their ability to host you in a very lavish kind of way. So you are right. I wouldn't say anything about the Western chairs. So C or D is not the best answer. And leaving your shoes on certainly is not the answer because in all of these cultures, taking your shoes off before entering a traditional room is what you do. After all, think about the history of this region. Um, many of the people were Bedouin type people who moved around in the desert. Who walked on the sand. Even today, the streets, you don't want to bring dirt from the street into the office or into someone's home. So there is a tradition of removing your shoes before you enter someone's tent, before you enter someone's home, and even before you enter a modern office. If you see shoes lined up outside the doorway, you take them off and then you enter. Now, this is a traditional office setting in Kuwait. Of course, in Kuwait, we have modern offices as well that are not traditional in any way, that reflect more the typical way that Western offices are set up around the world. But you might find yourself in a more traditional setting. And in this case, if you do, the right thing to do is remove your shoes upon entering and sit cross-legged. So correct to everyone who responded on that.
Beautiful. Let's go to scenario number 3.
Okay, scenario number 3. This is a little bit more complicated, and this is, I think, much more business focused, but here's the situation. As the female leader of your global team, and that's important, as the female leader of your global team, you expect to be included in the decision making at an upcoming meeting in Bahrain. Now, Bahrain is one of the countries within the Gulf Arabian region. Given your concerns about the traditionally subordinate gender-based role that business women in Gulf Arabia have had to assume in the past, what can you do to help ensure that your authority will be recognized at the upcoming meeting? So you are aware of the fact that in Gulf Arabia, traditionally, women did not have the same decision-making authority as men, traditionally. But you are now the female lead of a global team, and you do expect to be included, therefore, in the decision-making at an upcoming meeting in Bahrain. So because you know that in the past, women have not had decision-making authority in Gulf Arabian culture, what can you do to help ensure that your authority will be recognized at the upcoming meeting? That's the question. Now, there are 4 answers. And A says, prior to the meeting, you or your superior should communicate to their Bahraini counterpart that your leadership position is essential to the success of the meeting. Or B, you should assume a subordinate role to any Bahraini man at the meeting. Or C, you should assume a subordinate role to all male associates at the table, Bahraini or otherwise. Or D, the last answer. You should offer your thoughts at the meeting and assure your Bahraini associates that any final decision taken at the meeting will have to be approved by your superiors at headquarters. Okay, so we know the situation, and I'll read the four possible answers once again. Answer A, prior to the meeting, you or your superior should communicate to their Bahraini counterpart that your leadership position is essential to the success of the meeting. B, you should assume a subordinate role to any Bahraini man at the meeting. C, you should assume a subordinate role to all men at the table. Or D, you should offer your thoughts at the meeting and then assure your Bahraini associates that any final decision taken at the meeting will, of course, have to be approved by your superior at headquarters. A, B, C, or D, which is the right answer?
Let's see if we get any answer from the listeners. So far, not yet. Probably they're still digesting or going through it. So this female is her meeting, right? But he's coming to the region.
We have a team meeting, and the leader of this global team is a woman. And she's coming to this meeting in Bahrain. Now, she knows that traditionally in Gulf Arabia, women did not have decision-making authority. They were not leaders of their team, but she is now a leader of a global team, which happens to be meeting in Bahrain.
Well, I have four responses: Shimani, Sikha, Grace, and Ishmael. Munyebao. They all go for D. Another unanimous decision taken there. That the Shimani Mashiro, Sikha, Pajani, Grace, etc., and Ishmael Munyeba. I know Praish worked in the UAE in the region before.
And I will give another hint that C is not correct. So C we know is not correct. So the answer is A, B, or D, and we have four unanimous answers for D. Interesting.
Let's hear Ruth.
Ruth, what do you think?
So I also chose D, and the reason for me was that I considered that, well, if you look at Bahrain at the moment, I think they are trying to, yes, make women equal, bring in equity in terms of the genders. But there will still be very conservative people as well that are still quite conservative. So I thought if I can say my thoughts at the meeting, and then assure the Bahraini associates that any final decision is taken at the meeting will be approved by superior headquarters, it will appease those ones that are still more traditional and not see me as too arrogant or too cocky.
Right. And good thinking. I really like that analysis, Ruth. I think this is a tricky one. And
I have another answer which is different from George Mutenda Zamera. He's saying option A. Prior to the meeting, you or your superior should communicate to the Bahrain counterpart that your leadership position is essential to the success of the meeting.
which would be a way of telling them that they expect you to be in the decision-making process.
Mm.
And I think the answer is either A or D. I think both are correct. I think D is a good solution, but I personally think A is the better solution. Because by taking proactive action before the meeting and notifying the Bahraini associates that you expect them to regard her as the team lead and include her in decision making eliminates the problem, because then she comes to the meeting with full authority to participate and make decisions. And everyone in the region is aware of the fact that traditional gender roles are changing, and in fact, at the very least, are under pressure to change. And Ruth, your comment about the situation in Bahrain right now is absolutely correct. It is a conservative, as all of the cultures in the region are traditionally conservative. But relatively speaking, there are a lot of elements to Bahraini culture that are considerably progressive. And so we could say that things are changing in Bahrain. Are they changing quickly? Probably more quickly than in other parts of the region, certainly more quickly than um, in Saudi, for example, or Yemen. Every part is going through these changes in different ways. But I think in Bahrain, you could send this kind of a note ahead of time, which is legitimizing her authority and letting everyone know that she's going to be expected to be part of the decision-making process. So my best answer would be A. D is certainly not wrong, but B and C would not be appropriate.
Mm. Yeah. So we have two votes for A. Eric Shipalana added the voice there. And Sekha was saying A will experience retaliation, and D, you speak at a high authority and management. So, but she had chosen a D. So yeah, there's still two more exciting questions. I'm looking at time. We might have to speed up a little bit so that people get to hear other questions. So you're saying A is the answer, Dean?
I think I think A and D are both correct, but I think A is my preferred answer.
Great. Let's go to the next one. Oh, sorry. What is Rudolf? You did choose D, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool. Let's proceed, Dean.
Right. Okay. And with question number 4, remember we have 5 questions in total. Question number 4 scenario. Almost immediately, as soon as the meeting began, an endless serving of tea, followed by coffee, followed by tea, and then more coffee was being offered. Having achieved maximum caffeine overload, you politely decline additional tea and coffee. And you decline it the best way by A, B, C, or D. So you want to decline the tea, coffee, because you've had enough caffeine. But you don't want them to feel that you're insulting their offer at hosting you. So the best way to decline it, A, B, C, or D. A says, put your hand over your cup the next time the server comes around to pour. B, allow the server to refill your cup and then pass your cup to the person on your left with your left hand. C, shake your empty cup gently from side to side when the server comes around to offer you a refill. Or D, allow the server to refill your cup and then pass your cup to the person on your right with your right hand. So, what's the best way to decline more coffee or tea? A, B, C, or D? One more time. A, put your hand over your cup the next time the server comes around to serve you. B, allow the server to refill your cup and then pass your cup to the person on your left with your left hand. C, shake your empty cup gently from side to side when the server comes around to offer you a refill. And D, allow the server to refill your cup and then pass your cup to the person on your right with your right hand. A, B, C, or D?
Let's see what answers we get. They're still typing. Yeah. Ruth, maybe proceed with Ruth in the meantime while I'm waiting for answers to come through.
Yes, so for my answer is putting my hand over the cup the next time the person comes around with the coffee. And it's because I thought if I need to then shift my pen to the next person, either on the right or the left, they're probably also not interested in more coffee. I wouldn't know. And then the shaking of my empty cup gently from side to side, I wasn't too sure if that would work because probably it would confuse the person. So I just thought putting my hand over the cup will be quite clear to whoever is serving me that I don't want more coffee.
I have 2 A's from Shimane Mashiro, Sekapa Jane, and Dr. Nunu Muswaziwa Matabate. And then Sekhai also puts an E there, as a drink slowly.
As long as your cup is more than half full, the server will not refill it.
Yeah. And then there's a C from Grace Misajo, Levora Misajo. And Ishmael says, D, always use your right hand when you offer. A, you will seem rude. So I think it's just commenting on those options, why they wouldn't be.
Right.
What option did Ruth say? What option?
I think A, the one where you put your hand.
Oh, yes.
Into the cup, yeah.
Yeah, you have 3 choices coming from the listeners there.
Right. Well, in this case, I'm going to give you my hint, as I always do. But in this case, C is the correct answer.
Really?
It is correct. But it really depends now on the knowledge about the region specific. There is and the reason C is correct is because there is an old tradition in Gulf Arabia where if you don't want any more coffee or tea, you just shake your cup a little bit from side to side. Now, make sure it's an empty cup. So when the pourer comes, by shaking it a little bit, that's a sign to the server that you don't want to put any more in coffee in your tea. It would be a little bit rude to put your hand over the cup. That's like saying absolutely no more. And because taking care of a guest is such an important obligation in Gulf Arabia, it would have a little bit of an insulting implication. So the best thing to do is just shake your cup your empty cup from side to side when they attempt to refill it. But that is unique to Gulf Arabia, and it is an old tradition. And certainly they will understand if you put your hand over the cup, they know that, well, that means that you don't want any more as well. I think an important point I'd like to make is that in B, where it says, pass your cup to the person on your left with your left hand. This is important to know throughout the region and throughout much of North Africa and much of Africa as well. Passing things with your left hand, or passing important documents, or passing food, or a cup of coffee, or touching someone with your left hand is considered very rude, because the left hand traditionally is the hand that's used for personal hygiene. So if if you're going to pass anything to anybody, you pass it with the right hand. So that's just a little bit of information there that's useful in other scenarios as well.
Beautiful. Let's go to the last scenario.
Okay, well, the last scenario, question number 5, has to do with, well, after many attempts to get a commitment from your UAE associate, he agrees finally to sending you the report that you've been requesting by the date that you require. And he says, yes, yes, of course, for you, I will have the report on your desk by Tuesday, as you request, inshallah. But Tuesday comes and goes, and no report arrives. Then when you communicate your frustration to your associate, he no longer responds to your emails. But didn't he promise to deliver the report on Tuesday? What can you do? So the situation is he promised to deliver a report, but it doesn't come. You then communicate your frustration, and he no longer responds to you. So here's the A, B, C, or D best responses. A, don't worry about it. Just keep communicating your frustration. Eventually, you will get the report. B, find ways around him by going to his supervisor, for example, and letting them know about your associate's irresponsible behavior. C, stop communicating with your associate and start to build a secondary relationship with a completely new contact with whom you might have more success in the future. Or D, though he did promise to do his best to get you the report on Tuesday, he also reminded you with the use of the Arab term inshallah that all human effort is subject to the will of God, Allah. And therefore, if you do not receive the report by Tuesday, despite his best efforts, it simply was not meant to be. So instead, put your energies into building trusting relationships with your Gulf Arab colleagues so that they function as wastas for you, connecting you to the people who can make things happen on a timely basis. All right. So what's the best response? Last and final question. A, B, C, or D?
Let's see what we get. In the meantime, Ruth, what's your choice?
So I thought the one where you have to go to his supervisor, for example, find ways of getting to his supervisor and letting him know, because it's Tuesday, so there's a timeline issue. I just thought if I keep on trying to communicate to this person, I may never go anywhere because it's already taken a lot of time. And then I also thought if I stop communicating with him completely, that will also be quite rude from my side, but also at the same time, it will take forever to get a second relationship. The D part, I wasn't too sure what the worst stuffs are, but I also thought in terms of creating other relationships, it will take forever. So the most practical one is to just find ways of getting to the supervisor and getting them to basically get the document on Tuesday delivered.
And I have 3 Ds, Dean. One from Sekhalemete and D from one from Joe Masinya and Ishmael Munyepa.
Right. Well, I think the correct answer here is determined by whether you see this as a tactic for practical, immediate implications, or do you see a long-term strategy? Because if you think you have a long-term strategy, I would say D is the better answer. But Ruth, you are correct. If your immediate goal is to simply get the document as quickly as possible, then B is the answer. Find ways around him, maybe by going to a supervisor, for example, so that you can get somebody to take responsibility to send it to you. The danger with B, of course, is that in terms of a long-term strategy, you may be alienating your colleague going forward. But if that's your immediate and more important need, then B is certainly correct.
And it is also by popular choice here on the chart. Mbusetse Matole, Dr. Nunu Muhaziwa Matabate, Ishmael Munyeba, Joe Masinya, and Sekhale Metsi. Good choice. Oh, sorry. What did Ruth choose?
I think Ruth chose B as well.
No, B, not D. Did you choose B for Ben, Ruth?
I chose B when you go to the supervisor.
Oh, yes.
The more immediate tactic, not
Yeah.
the long-term strategy.
Yeah, because I was looking at the Tuesday date that is provided, that it probably means it's a very urgent thing. But then also I wasn't sure what the word wastas means. Does it mean a skivvy that is going to be running around for me, or what does it mean? I wasn't too sure about that.
Good question, Ruth. Wasta is an important cultural term when thinking about Gulf Arabia in general. A wasta is your connection, somebody who can do something for you, someone who can connect you to the right people, who can make things happen. And when you're beginning your developing a mindset for working effectively in Gulf Arabia, you should think first about developing a wasta, somebody who can make sure that things get done when you need them to get done, and who can connect you to the right people to make things happen. Put your energy into finding a wasta. Don't worry so much about the details and immediate issues, because if you find your wasta, everything else will get solved. But without a wasta, you will constantly have to be handling these kinds of little fires that always need to be put out and that never really successfully get solved.
Let me spell Wasta for those who are obviously they don't see how it's written. W-A-S-T-A. Is that an English? What language is that? I didn't hear.
That's Arabic. That's Arabic.
W-A-S-T-A. Wasta. Okay, we've run out of time. Dean, this is beautiful. I really enjoyed it. I want you to wrap up and tell us what is the next culture we are going to be dealing with in the August show. Second Wednesday of every month, by the way, for those who are not aware. Second Wednesday of every month, 1800 hours South African Standard Time and 1200 hours EST, Dean's time. And of course, Ruth, please, if you can just wrap up for us.
Well, Sam, thank you very much. We're going to be dealing with one of the oldest cultures in the world and one of the most critical cultures in the world today. We're going to be looking at China.
In August.
Right.
Third Wednesday, August is China. And we will be having the BRICS in South Africa in that month. So it's